Leandro, can you pull it up? Machuki's presentation?
I'm trying.
Okay.
I have my introductory slides and also the Michukis and business in my screen. Do you see? Oh, I see. There's a permission issue in my. It's coming. I need to restart.
Give us 1 second, everyone. We'll get started, everyone, in just about 2 minutes. In the meantime, if you haven't taken advantage of looking through the note well, please do. I won't read through it. I made that mistake the first time in the first meeting I was in. Some people were amused by that, but please note the new note well. And the agendas in the meeting materials, Leandro Navarro and Jane Coffin, that's me, are the co-chairs of Gaia. We have a good list of folks here today to get us kicked off. Current circumstances around the planet, as we all know, and getting people connected is a preoccupation for many of us, including everyone who's going to be speaking today. Many of us have either been involved in the standard side of the house, in building networks, and building communities, and funding to sustain networks as well. And some of the speakers today are going to be talking to you about actual hacks, actual things that they're doing with networks, considerations to think about for building out new networks with Leandro and the environmental sustainability related issues. We've got an IXP presentation from Mark Briere. Machuki will be talking about sustainability for community networks. And we'll have the resilience of the internet in Ukraine from Vesna, who's with RIPE NCC, a good colleague of many of ours, and the decentralized and federated communication services in disaster zones from Dmitry Vitiliev. Leandro, I don't need to speak too much longer. I've introduced the fact that we have a good agenda in the data tracker. We've got the note well for people to take advantage of. Folks should mute if they're not speaking. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Leandro, to do any other housekeeping and intros. Or I should say, most people have 20 minutes to speak with 5 to 10 minutes for Q&A. If the speakers would like to cut their presentations a little short so you have more Q&A, no worries. And if we've got time afterwards, we'll just entertain more questions because we have a really great group of experts with us here today. And I will try and speak more slowly. I noticed in some of the traffic from the list that it was important that we all say our names slowly. I'm Jane Coffin. My co-chair, Leandro Navarro, will introduce himself a bit more and what he does. And for each of the speakers, please introduce who you are slowly when you speak and where you come from, not only geographically, but what organization you work with, if you like. I mean, we're all here as individuals, but some people like to know who you're working with. Anyway, Leandro, over to you.
Thank you, Jane. I hope you can see the agenda in the screen. This is the list of the 5 presentations we had scheduled for today. Before we start, is anyone willing to take notes during the meeting? Any volunteer can say so in the chat. The chat is on the left of the Meeteco application.
I can help with some of the notes too.
Okay, thank you very much. So regarding presentations. Dimitri told me that he might arrive a bit late because he's in the US and the time is tight. And I don't see Mark Brugger in the list. So maybe we might need to skip the second presentation. So, well, the first presentation is it's mine. It's a warm-up presentation. It's based on something that I already presented a couple of years ago, but I wanted just to revisit the topic a little bit. Okay, so this is my presentation. It's about, as you see, about the internet and the relation with environmental sustainability. Are we talking about an evolution or a revolution needed in that respect? Oops. Well, there are some numbers. Sorry, there's a Zoom problem. Well, you know, there are billions of ICT devices on the users and in the network. And to what extent can we afford that growth? And because our working group is about internet for all means a lot of devices in the end. And imagine about the energy spent or the materials spent on all what we do on the internet. It used to be that the internet was a solution to the problems of excessive footprint, but the internet itself is also nowadays becoming bigger and bigger. And climate change is something that we have to do right. We only have one opportunity because we only have one world, and then, well, decarbonization, that's so-called like that, the reduction of emissions, the reduction of material impact on our infrastructure requires solutions on time, and that is either evolutionary or revolutionary. This graph doesn't come from us; it comes from ITU, but they've done a work to translate the IPCC temperature trajectories of climate change into what is the requirement for the ICT sector. And the ICT sector is growing, and you see the blue line from 2015 to 2030. It's growing in terms of emissions, but to comply with the 1.5 degrees of temperature climate change increase, let's say we have to not continue increasing, but radically go in the opposite direction of reducing about half of the emissions from 2015. So this is connected to keeping climate change to 1.5 degrees, which means no severe effects on climate. And this is going to happen soon, in fact, because there are reports that says that to meet this deadline on 2030, we need to, by 2025, we need to peak on and start decreasing by that year. And this is in only 9 or 10 IETF meetings. So we have to do something so that by in 10 IFT meetings, we not only have ideas, but also we have solutions for the problem that are already delivering impacts, reductions. Electricity is one aspect. I found another reference on literature that says that ICT technology overall might be consuming about more than 50% of global electricity and contribute to the total of about 23% of greenhouse gas emissions. It's surprising to me, but this is reported in a publication. At least we we have to take into account. If you look at the contribution of the internet and of the user devices to greenhouse gas emissions, you see that manufacturing, production has a big impact, huge impact. Use of the device itself doesn't have too much, but of course, if you add to it, and this is just the device, but if you look at the overall consumption, the use phase consists on a part on the device itself, but also we are using servers on the internet. We are using the network, the mobile network and the IP network, and therefore the total among the total amount, about half of it is connected to network to the network infrastructure. So we have an issue with that. So the question is, I'm not coming with a solution, I'm just coming with a problem. What can we do? Can we do anything to really prepare for a peak on 2025 or to meet the expectations for the 2030? Maybe we can't. And because probably evolutionary approaches like reducing, optimizing energy and materials in the protocols might not really give us a change of trend. And I'm joking, revolutionary, maybe we need to go back to FidoNet, or we need to come up with a new IPv7 or something, or some other proposals about radically new network architectures. And there are the typical ingredients that we know from protocol design about saving data, saving transfers, optimizing protocols, reducing the payloads of messages, tweaking timers and so forth. But this is more like evolutionary, of course. I mentioned that in the previous meeting 2 years ago. There is already a lot of IETF RFCs that deal with, for instance, only with energy. And probably I'm missing many of them. So there is work in the IETF, no doubt. But do we have a plan, let's say, to really meet these deadlines? And because, well, it's only once that we have a chance. I wanted to collect ideas. Here you have a link. This is very long, but here you have a short URL which redirects to the previous one, in which you can add your own ideas about what we can do. I won't explain my own ideas. These are in the slide, but I want you to really come up with a proposal. And in fact, this can be interactive. If you just go to the page, to the URL that I mentioned, you can add things you would like to keep. I'm joking here, like keeping SNMP. Well, it's an example of something that should be there anyway. Something that radically, these are just like quick ideas, just to give examples. And then, of course, you can type your own card like this, and you can also, instead of creating a new card, you can always like add an extra point to one of the nodes that are already there. So and then, well, it has a +1 vote. Okay. So this is my proposal, that we collectively, despite we don't have a breakfast place where we can sit together and discuss. So let's try to use this board to collect ideas about how can we try or not try to meet this environmental challenge. Because as I said at the beginning, Gaia is about the internet for all, but to have an internet for all means we have to make sure that it's also for the planet. And our infrastructures are intensive in materials, in energy, in devices which are more or less durable. Of course, we can, as humans, use it less, but there are new applications in the horizon talk about using it more. So having more connectivity in more places means having more base stations, more dense, to have more people connected. Mm, so we can, yeah, we can come up even with more frugal protocols, but more frugal implementations means more opportunities to connect more people, and then providing access to more people means a rebound effect of well, having more units of this more efficient device that in the end might have the opposite effect that we try. And well, we have to decide if we want to give up on this, or let's say revolt. And from IRTF, it's an ideal place to start planning what can be done to reach 2025 with a small decrease of impact, and see if we can or not reach 2030 with significant contribution from the internet to the climate change mitigation. And that's the IRTF way. Try to come up with a research agenda, discuss the topics, and prepare documents that could later on translate into industrial specifications. So that's my cry, let's say, to focus on the environmental challenge, because as I said before, it we only have one opportunity to make it or fail. Okay, that's my presentation. I don't know if you questions, comments.
Michael White in the queue.
Okay, I'm Michael Wetzel. Am I up? May I
Hi.
speak? Okay. Thank you very much for this. I very much agree that this is important work and important to do. I only disagree with one of the tiny notes that you have already put there, which says quick versus green. I think that, well, it's not just thinking. I did a test on what happens with Wi-Fi devices, and it's clear. I mean, up to now, still most mobile phones, they implement a relatively simple power saving scheme where you would, or other Wi-Fi devices, where you would simply, after a couple hundred milliseconds after activity, go into sleep mode. So if we are able to cut the flow completion time of transfers, if we just are a bit more efficient at transferring data, in fact, that can have a big impact. So I did simple tests with different initial window values, and using a window of 10 instead of 2 or 4 in the case where you don't have any packet loss, because it's not always better, right? You can cut energy usage by something in the order of 20-30%. So it doesn't have to be a trade-off. And I think this view of performance versus being green as a trade-off, I think is what partially harms activity in this area, right? Because I don't turn on power saving mode on my phone because it hurts my performance, right? So I think trying to combine these, I think this is a good way to go.
Yeah, thank you for your view. I try to be controversial, but yeah, I agree with you that people is not really willing to degrade significantly their performance, and if there are other ways, we must follow them. And no, I mean the comment of quick can be quick in terms of fast, or quick the application layer HTTP, just like yeah. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I see Besna is also on the queue.
Yes, thank you, Leandro. This is such a wonderful topic, very dear to my heart, and I'm so glad that you brought it up. So, as somebody from RIPE NCC, I would like to invite you to speak about this at the RIPE meeting, which is coming up in May in Berlin, and we also have a SIGCOM proposal for the Green Tech Internet workshop. And if you would like to be our speaker there or participant, we'll send you an invite together with University of Amsterdam colleagues. And now, not speaking as a RIPE-NC employee, but as a planet citizen, if I have to choose between two options in your title, I would go for revolution. Thank you.
You would say you would go for evolution with R, isn't it?
With an R, with an rebellion.
Yeah. Yeah, the difficulty is always like I would also go in that direction, simply because evolution sounds like it's about changing the growth, not simply changing the sign of the decrease. But we have to find ways to make it work. I see, David. Feel free to speak.
Hi, David Oliver. I see on the Cambridge University Bitcoin electricity consumption index that last year Bitcoin consumed 137 terawatts of electricity, about 1% of the global electricity bill. So I wonder if working in the margins on this is working on something on cryptocurrency algorithms is vastly more important than working on the margins on what we're doing on devices.
Yeah, I agree with you that there are big contributors, and sounds like consensus algorithms in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency have a margin for improvement, a huge margin. But anyway, I think it's not about choosing one, let's say, topic and focus on it only, but I think we have to identify all sources for savings probably and find out how they contribute to the total reduction. But yeah, very good point. Ignacio?
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Well, thank you for your presentation. Just a brief comment. First, the problem with the crypto devices they are based on consuming energy. Is the idea of in the deep end is the idea of how they work. If you don't consume energy, you cannot compute as fast as you need to in order to produce a new blockchain. This is one of the problems. On the other hand, I already write in the chat about software efficiency. Normally, we build software without regard about the efficiency. I mean, how long is our code, how times it runs on the CPU and so on. And this is really a substantial problem. I'm not sure, but I think the distributed version of the things could be better, but not always. We have to take to keep an eye on that. Well, this is all my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ignacio. Yeah, I suppose that when people work on IoT systems, they are fully aware of the limitations of the device, energy, I mean, and battery power and CPU power. But in general, outside the IoT world, we assuming that if we develop software, hardware will come and provide us the resources to do. So there is more and more complexity in the code, assuming that hardware can manage with that or networks can manage with that. And if we think that climate and global warming is a boundary, then of course we are more in the IoT mindset than in the future. Hardware will provide us whatever we need, whatever we propose in the protocols. And yeah, I agree with you that current blockchain systems are based on a competition to consuming energy translated to CPU power. well, it sounds like this is not viable, or it's not scalable. We cannot say that this model of uh, computing transactions would work for everyone in the world. If everyone were using cryptocurrencies for every monetary transaction in our planet, well, but simply there will be no planet already. So we have to find other ways to provide it for all, which is the topic of our working group. Okay, so I think I just you please give us like ideas about how we can translate what is the space of the possible, what is the space of the feasible, so we can in future discussions talk about concrete proposals that might help to get there or close to there. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Leandro.
Mhm.
We don't have Mark on the Mark hasn't joined us yet, so I
No.
think we'll go up next with Michuki Mwangi from the Internet Society. Michuki's presentation is on sustainability for community networks. Michuki, if you're ready, we'll give you 20 minutes for your prez, and then we'll have Q&A after. Over to you.
Thank you, Jen. I trust you can hear me.
We can hear you. Confirmed.
All right, good. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are. My name is Michuki Mwangi from the Internet Society, and today I would like to cover a topic that is increasingly becoming of interest to us based on some of the work that we do with respect to making community networks sustainable. So maybe I'll just give some background around why this issue has come to our attention and what we're hoping to be able to accomplish with it by providing some background. So maybe the next slide. Please. So the rationale behind community networks is basically brought on by the fact that there is an existing connectivity challenge which exists where nearly 3 billion people are still offline, and the existing traditional business models that are used to connect people around the world tend not to scale enough to connect those in rural, remote, and underserved areas. And as we've seen in the last 2 years, there's been a major highlighting of the connectivity gap, especially when situations require people to try and transition to using connectivity as a way of keeping life going on when under circumstances such as lockdowns and so on. And we've seen the impact that has had, especially in emerging markets where people don't have access at home, and so usage has gone down, and we've had countries and communities and enterprises trying to scramble and come up with innovative ways to try and get people connected during the height of the pandemic. And so as we are trying to find more solutions to get more people connected, one of the key things that's going to be important for us to answer is how to keep these community networks or the solutions that we identify to be sustainable. So moving on to the next slide. So community networks are one of those complementary solutions that have emerged and is making an impact with respect to how they operate, because they are built by and for the communities that they serve. So they have a bottom-up approach. They are complementary in that they basically are built in locations where the economics for the traditional operators don't really work well. And so they complement where traditional operators are unable to go for various reasons. And also they largely rely on the community and the local champions that exist in those areas to try and make them sort of be more resilient to the challenges that traditional business models are likely to face. And so the bottom-up approach tends to building those resiliency factors that are needed to make them sustainable in their respective environments. So going on to the next slide, wanted to talk about how those community networks are designed. They take to look at various approaches. First, they will suddenly vary in sizes depending on the community they're trying to serve. They could be as big as 50,000 subscribers or more, like Guifi in Barcelona, and could be as few as 50 people in a very small village. They also have different setups in terms of the technology that they use, largely dependent on what issues they're trying to solve for the community that they serve. And they also are driven by, or the reasons of being established will vary depending on what they're trying to solve for. So some of them will be trying to provide alternative, more affordable connectivity solutions. There could be other options like 4G and so on, which could be out of the reach of the people that are in the area. And so they're looking for something alternative or complementary. They're looking for less autonomy or more autonomy, and also looking to gain better access based on what is available. We've seen situations where they only have 3G, but it's not reliable. People have to go to certain locations in the area to just get access. And finally, of course, they're also designed based on what the community perceives to be the most useful structure from a governance perspective that will work for them. So all community networks are basically not identical because of these factors. And but they're generally underpinned, and if we could go to the next slide, by a number of pillars or key things that are important to them. First, for community networks to emerge, they certainly need an enabling regulatory and policy framework. And if that doesn't exist, it becomes harder for them to emerge. Secondly, community networks will actually need access to backhaul, and without backhaul, then it becomes quite difficult for them to operate in a sustainable way or even provide meaningful, usable connectivity. Another important aspect for community networks is to have knowledge and know-how. By knowledge basically means that they need to have the technical expertise, not just to run the network, but also they need some know-how on how to operate a business and make it sustainable by following best practices that are used in operating businesses. They also need to have a user base. That means they need to be able to bring in the buying of the stakeholders or the community whom they serve to be able to take on this service. And finally, they also need to run the entire network in a sustainable manner. And this is going to be the focus of part of the things that I like to talk about going forward in the next few slides. So if we go to the next slide, we'll look at the challenges that community networks face. And we've tried to categorize this into three areas: the financial, technical, and regulatory. The financial component being pretty much focused on the ability for community networks to bootstrap from the beginning, to be able to operate sustainably, and also be able to grow once they are sustainable. So there are scaling issues involved, there are issues to do with the initial setup, and there are also issues to do with the operating day-to-day operations. On the technical side, it's pretty much about the technology or the technical know-how that they have, the expertise that they have, and also the tools and software sets available for them to be able to manage the network, and provide a good quality level of service, and being able to do so at a low cost. And finally, on the regulatory side, is being able to access the spectrum that they need, or the resources that they need to run the network, but also having an environment that actually allows them to thrive and grow. So for the next part, I want to focus on one area out of these three areas under technical, which is the open source solutions that are really important. Because if we go on to the next slide, you will see that there are quite a number of tools that exist open source that networks have actually used over time to manage the network, to provide, which actually enables the network operators to provide good quality services. But we see that most of the open source tools that are mature, stable, and well developed tend to fall in one category, which was on the network management side. There are quite a number of really useful tools that are well utilized both in medium and large networks. And that works really well. And that's also easy because they've matured to a level that it's easy for them to be easily deployed without requiring in-depth knowledge of, like system admin skills and so on, to just be able to deploy them and use them for network monitoring. And this has been really helpful. However, when we go to the authentication and accounting side, or the billing side, then we start seeing some sort of limitations in terms of the tools that are available, open source tools that are available, especially when you're looking from the graphical user interface side, to sort of support some of the backend tools that already exist. An example here is that we've had something like FreeRadius, which has been widely deployed across many service provider networks. It's very stable, very reliable. But then when you look at the front-end tools that exist to manage FreeRadius, then you start seeing a limitation. A lot of them going to the commercial, or the I'll say the commercial side of things, and they're not entirely cost friendly, if I could put it that way, when we're looking at a community networks perspective. Part of the challenge with community networks is that the areas that they serve may not have the scale in terms of number of users to be able to, be able to turn on profitability, or be able to have surpluses within a very short time, turnaround time. And so where commercial products will sort of easily support that business model. The community network model does tend to rely on a lot of donations and grants and so on. So the model is quite different. So if we go on to the next slide, we've tried to understand why it's important. Oh, sorry, I think we missed a slide there. So yes, to understand why billing solutions are important for CNs. Of course, not just for authentication and getting people connected, but for them to be able to generate revenue, to scale their growth, so that they can expand the network to cover more people, and also improve their sustainability and reduce their dependence on grants and donations, which is basically one of the main sources on which they use to deploy the initial phase of the community network. So what are the things that we've been trying to look for in a billing solution for community networks? So we've tried to highlight a couple of items in the next slide, and those items that are key or seem to be important for community networks is support for the main protocols that are used, Radius, PPOE, L2TP, and hotspots. They are suddenly looking for a simplified graphical user interface. Some of the tools that exist do require a high level of knowledge on a system administration from medium to advanced level. Ease of deployments basically is also another thing that's needed. And also the deployment on low-powered hardware. Most community networks, especially those in rural and underserved areas, tend to deal with power issues. And so a lot of the equipment are low-power devices. So anything that can be deployed on as simple as a Raspberry Pi or something similar in terms of a low-power device, that will be a tool that they will be open to considering. And of course, some features like configurable prepaid and postpaid billing packages, some basic reporting, and at least with some level of community support, including other community networks. So I'll go on to the next one, and the reason why we're actually looking for this is because we are looking for solutions that we can recommend to CMs, because this is becoming an increasing issue with respect to their sustainability. We had a session earlier this year with a number of community networks, and the session was about billing solutions. And most of some of the questions that they asked is what are the available open source solutions that they could easily take on and deploy. But there are well-developed commercial ones, or some that have a gradual growth path. But the costing model is certainly out of reach for the current set of community networks that we're working with. So we are certainly looking for options that we can recommend to them. And if you go on to the next slide, you'll see that we still have lots of new and existing community networks we would like to support this year, certainly more over the coming years. And so we'll certainly be interested to see what's out there, what's available, what you've heard, new, so that we can integrate this as well if it does require training, to be able to integrate that into the training that we are offering, and also work with various stakeholders to make sure that this is an element that we are able to address, and make sure that community networks are able to thrive and grow. So I'll stop there, and if you do have comments, I'm happy to take them, and any suggestions that you or recommendations that you can offer.
Thank you so much, Yuki. Let's see if there are. I see Jay Ignacio is willing, is in the queue, so not free to talk or ask your question.
Sorry,
Okay.
Sorry, I was keep my hand up. Sorry, I
Okay.
did it,
No problem. I see Julius in the queue. Feel free.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so community networks were were a big hope in Europe in the 2000s. And the dynamic seems to have died out. So they still exist, but there are no further developments. I attribute that to the availability of cheap cellular internet. So what I would like to know is how big of a phenomenon are community networks in the developing world? Do you have any data or perhaps any anecdotal evidence about whether it's a completely minority thing or whether it's big?
Yeah, that's a good question, Julius. So it's actually an emerging trend. I would want to refer to it as an emerging trend, because in many parts of the emerging world, they're actually difficult to set up because of the policy and regulatory environment. And now we are at a phase where we are seeing a number of countries that are actually taking a positive step to change the policy environment to allow community networks to actually be established. And so some countries where the policy environment is enabling, we are seeing them coming up. And so through the activities that we do in our engagements with them, these are now becoming the questions that they're asking, so that networking tools, network monitoring tools are available, but the billing solution tools are a bit of a challenge for them. It's part a skill issue, but also looking at where they are. They may not be able to retain highly skilled system admins in rural areas, because the moment you develop their skills, they lose the people to bigger networks that are able to pay more. And so we're suddenly looking for tools that will be able to be low in terms of the skill level requirements, not high level, just medium to low to medium skill level to be able to operate and maintain those kind of systems.
I joined
I
the
see.
queue,
Yes.
yeah, and just to support what Michuki's saying, Julius, there's quite a lot of been a resurgence in the work in community and municipal networks around the world. I work in that space as well, and we're seeing actually an interesting resurgence in the United States, believe it or not, with municipal networks, open source, open access networks, Muni networks. There's been an interesting, there's a political dynamic here too, of course, where some places don't allow municipal networks, so you have to work with electrical co-ops. So the term, and that's in the US in 17 of the 50 states, there's been a lobbying force in some of the industry that went against community networks and municipal networks. But you're seeing a resurgence because there's been a keen focus on the lack of connectivity around the world. As Michuki was well pointing out, that there's a high costs in certain areas, but we're seeing that local resurgence, and we're seeing a lot of activity in places around the world, from Brazil to South Africa to Kenya, to revise licensing, to revise access to spectrum. Tribal communities in the United States didn't have access to spectrum, right, for many, many years, on their own terms and their own licensing mechanisms. So you're seeing changes. Brazil liberalized the entire 6 gigahertz band to be unlicensed, so that there could be more network activity at that local level, to have more networks come in. These are not insignificant networks. In any event, there's lots out there, and there's some new work being done on the business models. So to point out the focus that Michuki was talking about on the costs, and how to look at different business models and for sustainability factors. So stay tuned. There's a lot of good data out there on the resurgence in Muni and community and other small networks. I guess you could call them non-traditional operators.
Thank you, Jane. I'm also on the queue, also to comment about this topic. Well, I think the importance of focusing on community networks is that there must be other business models than the operator model, the for-profit model, because simply there are places where there is no economic margin to attract the operator models, but there is already a lot of social margin to benefit the community from connectivity. And then if there is a way that a community, a collective, can get connectivity when individual connectivity is not viable, that is in the core of community networks. And in fact, GIFINET is sometimes mentioned as very big, but it started and it continues to be a federation of local initiatives, collective shared locally, would come to provide them connectivity. The numbers are changing, but for instance, in the last European Broadband Awards, there are 3 nominees from Spain to the award. One is it's a regional open network operator that is a really useful infrastructure enabling widespread connectivity, and the other are two community network initiatives which are part of Gifinet, but which are based on community fiber. Again, a remote valley in a place where operators are not interested to go, but citizens can deploy their own fiber, and then of course connect at a wholesale backhaul connection. So this collective connectivity it's an important element. And what Michuki mentioned, it's in general the tragedy of free open software. Sometimes they call it software commons. And in community networks, there are interesting examples like LibreRouter or LibreServer, in which well, there is a struggle to find funds to keep the developers and benefit many communities that without that software and those tools, they will not be able to really set up viable, sustainable network, both in technology wise and also in economic terms. So thank you for focusing on this topic.
Thank you, Leandro and Jim. Those are really good points that you've made, and we'll keep looking and discussing in various forums. But in case you hear, our contacts of the people who are working on these projects are on the screen. So feel free to send us a note and we'll follow up with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we can then move to the next presentation. This is Vesna's chance. I have your slides here.
Okay, can you hear me? I've switched to the headphones. Hi, so I'm happy to be here. I'm Vesna. I work for RIPE NCC as a community builder. Yes, so yeah, next slide. So this presentation is going to, well, normally it's the content is mostly about the traditional internet and the infrastructure, but my focus will be on people, because this is who is mostly impacted with the war which is going on in Ukraine. So it's about the resilience of the infrastructure, but it's also about the resilience of people who are impacted. Next slide, please. And I'm speaking here on behalf of my colleagues who had done a lot of work in documenting what is happening with the networks in Ukraine. You can see here their photos. Emil Aben is a data scientist, and here he's pictured as measuring the internet. He couldn't be here today because he's working on the next analysis, which will be about the impact, or like how does the Russian internet infrastructure is weathering the war, and also because his two sons are having their birthday party today, so he prioritized small humans to being online with us. But I can bring all the questions that you have and that I cannot answer, I can bring them to him. And the second co-author of this work is Alex Semyenaka. He is in Ukraine. So he's personally going through all the trauma of the war which is going on there. And this talk is dedicated to him. Alex, my heart is with you and with all the other people impacted with the war. Next. So all the information and the links and the graphs you can find in the articles. My talk today will mostly be about the most recent article, which is about the resilience of the internet. So actually, looking at the infrastructure after the 3 weeks of the war. And then there will be a little bit about the outages, which is described in the previous article, which was about the beginning of the war. If you are curious about how the internet used to look like in 2019, then there are also slides from Alex that he gave at another conference, and you can also access them through here. And my work was about the resilience of the networkers during the COVID pandemic. And it is still very relevant that we need to take care of each other and take care of our needs of our physical health, mental health, and human connections, and not only making sure that the network connections are working. Next. So the elements that I'm going to cover in a little bit more detail. So first of all, as I said, the human connections and dedication of the network operators in Ukraine and their courage and perseverance in staying in the country and doing their work and fixing the infrastructure. Then the two next elements are the decentralization of their market, of the internet service providers, and then a presence of large amount of internet exchange points. Then there was there's also something that we didn't cover too much, but you can see it also following this link, which is the interconnection of Ukraine as a country to the transit providers. And that has been measured by the Internet Health Report, a project that is independent from the RIPE NCC, but is still using the data from the RIPE NCC. And then there's also a work from other organizations like Telegeography that shows the existence of the fiber connections of Ukraine to the rest of the world. Next, please. So about the decentralization. So this graph shows, this graph is actually based on the RIPE Atlas. And a short introduction to what the RIPE Atlas is. This is a measurement project that is now older than 10 years by the RIPE NCC. It consists of 10,000 and more hardware devices, and in the last 3 years also software probes. The hardware devices are hosted in the people's houses and the data centers, so at the edges of the network and also close to the infrastructure, and they do continuous pings, trace routes, DNS lookups, and a few other measurements towards root name servers. And we collect this data and publish it as an open data that anybody can analyze. And we also do a lot of analysis ourselves. And also all the hosts that are providing the connectivity and the electricity to these small devices in their locations, they can use the other 10,000 probes to perform their own measurements. And that also adds to the open data. So this is a great project. However, it has its limitations because it's only measuring like the lowest layers of the infrastructure, and because we don't do the HTTP measurements, so we don't measure the web, we really measure only the internet connectivity. And so at some point Emil created this kind of overlay on top of this Atlas measurements and analysis, which is called Country JEDI. And so he created a mesh measurement between all the probes within every country. And so you can see how are the end users reaching each other and what those paths traverse. So on this circle, he visualizes only the companies that have more than 1% of the user base within that country. So here you can see that that actually only visualizes 45% of all the companies, which means there is another 55% which is not visualized, which are really, really small providers. And so the green ones are where we do have ripe atlas probes, and the other ones we actually don't have covered. And so this is a call for the people from other countries to actually deploy these devices if you are interested in the measurements about your own country. And so this is like a technical side, but then he also looked into the economy and the market, and he looked into something called HH index, which stands for two very difficult names, which I'm not going to pronounce. And so based on this index, Ukraine is the fourth in the world. So there is very little market concentration. In other words, the market is very, very decentralized. So that makes it very resilient, because if one provider is impacted, then the traffic can move to all the other providers. And so this sounds like really great, but still it makes me really sad to think that this resilience had to be tested and that these providers are still going offline because of the war. So it's really hard to talk about this in these kind of cold technological terms, while that actually means that there are people there being hurt. But yes, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so this is also super interesting. I didn't know this about Ukraine before we started doing this analysis, and that is that they have 19 internet exchange points. So that's really a very large number. And those are the internet exchange points registered in the peering DB. However, ripe atlas only sees 13 of them. And so we have this other project that Emil created, which is IXP Country JEDI. And so again, this is a probe mesh, and it shows the paths, and it shows like, do they traverse an internet exchange point, and do they stay within a country? So that's a different visualization, which you can find if you follow on the slides. And so there is 13 of them, and they're all differently color coded. So you can see that there is quite a like diversity of colors on this graph. And so that means also there isn't one dominant internet exchange point. Like, all of them are very much in use, and they provide a lot of interconnectivity. And okay, the last part of the slide is a mistake, so ignore that. So can we go to the next one? Yeah, so now we go to the little bit less positive outcomes of our analysis. So you could see the damage that at the beginning of the war, the infrastructure had experienced. And so this is one of the providers. And this is like, we have had 15 probes there, and then a lot of them got disconnected and slowly went up after a while. And you can read more details and see it for yourself if you follow the links in the article, which is on this page. And next slide, please. So again, the bottom slide shows or the decrease over time of the number of connected probes. But as I said, we are mostly focused on the physical infrastructure. And so for the mobile connectivity, we have portrait data from Cloudflare. And you could also see there that the people, when they started moving away from their houses, traveling, escaping as refugees, or the houses got destroyed, then connectivity moved more to the mobile connections. Next slide, please. Yeah, so there was other people reporting on what is happening in Ukraine. And again, this is more of a human aspect. So Julian Oliver commented on Emil's article on Twitter that it takes diversity and solidarity to keep the internet up and running. And then there are other people who are situated in Ukraine who share the photos of how the physical infrastructure is being repaired and how the competitors help each other. So it's it's more than the market forces that make these people want to keep their customers connected. It is they're understanding how important the internet is in the lives of people to stay connected to their families and to receive the news. So they are helping each other even if they are competitors in a commercial sense. And I think I have only 2 more slides. So this is an initiative created by NOG Alliance, Network Operators Group. They started collecting equipment and monitoring donations to help the network operators in Ukraine. And they got in touch with them. So they are really knowing specifically which equipment, which tools are needed and where. And so shipping them from Western Europe towards the border and then being met there with the operators in the country and distributing the equipment which has been damaged. So if you would like to help and you are a techie, you can you can check it out how this works. And if you are interested in some other way of helping, like with more like community building and humanitarian help, in Amsterdam and in Holland we have a lot of initiatives, so you can get in touch with me. On the other hand, I really have to get out of this frame of mind of like charity and help in that sense, because as you can see on the quote on the next slide, it's not about being like getting there and helping. It's about mutual aid and solidarity, because our liberation, our revolution, as Leandro said, depends on all of us being helping each other. So what is happening in Ukraine is happening in many other places. And I also speak as somebody coming from ex-Yugoslavia, the country that has also caused the wars and suffered the wars and went through the disconnections of the internet and fight for the open communication. So we are working on all of this together. And today the report is about the resilience of Ukrainian internet, but it could be about your country next. It was about my country 20 years ago. And so let's work together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vesna, sharing the numbers, but also to share the feelings. I wonder if there are any questions or comments.
Vesna, how do people get, sorry to jump the queue, but anyone in the queue. Rajiv is in the queue, but one quick question for you, Vesna. Could you pop your email or in the chat and also the...
Oh, yes. The next slide has, I'm sorry.
Okay, voila.
Yes, so
Perfect.
these are the contact details also of Emil and Alex and myself. As I said, I'm only a spokesperson. They did all the work.
Thank you so much. And the NOGs for networkers, do you have a link to the team there?
I'll put that on. It is also on the slides.
Perfect. Okay, so we're good there. Rajiv.
I'm based here in India, and we are also lucky to have a similar situation to what you described in Ukraine, with a large number of inter-exchange points. We have over 2 dozen IXPs at a larger scale and a number of smaller scale IXPs. One thing that I would be interested to understand, if you have any thoughts on it, is how much interconnect was there across ISPs, inter-exchange points themselves. Okay, so in other words, how closely did the IXPs themselves collaborate versus in cases where individual ISPs are connected to multiple exchange. Because here in India, it's very common for even a small to medium ISP to sometimes have two different peerings with two different IXPs, but the IXPs themselves don't seem to have as much interest in peering across their infrastructure. So just
I
wanted
don't.
to know what you knew about that dynamic in the Ukraine.
Yeah, so I don't have any extra information about that, but I think in general, probably somebody else is more authoritative to give that answer. Yeah, I see. Yeah, that the IXPs do not really connect with each other. They are there to connect the networks that
The
interconnect.
only exception here in India is we have a state-sponsored or government-sponsored ISP group called NIXI, the National Inter-Exchange of India, which has plans to bring up at least a dozen inter-exchange points, and all of them are interconnected. Though they don't have as much penetration and connectivity with local ISPs as the commercial IX points do. So is there an equivalent? Is there a state sponsored or a government run IXP network in the Ukraine?
I believe that there isn't. I think that these are all like individual IXPs. And if you okay, I will put this link in there. So like Jedi.tribe.net, there you can actually go and see in more detail the names of all of these IXPs and also a different visualization. This one, yeah, shows like them each one individually, but then we have another one which shows how the what is the percentage of all the probes that go through any IXP, but not
Okay.
what you're asking for, because I think that is not usually the case. Like, how do they connect to each other?
Okay. I just thought that might be interesting to know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I don't see any questions in the queue.
I want to say for the people who are in person at IETF, my colleague Tis is also there. Oh, look, he's waving. So if you have any questions for anybody in the RIPE NCC, please approach him, and then we'll talk to him when he comes back to Amsterdam. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So having no one in the place in the queue and no one in the queue in Mitico, we can thank you again and move to the next presentation. Into the program, we had one more presentation from Dimitri, but I haven't. Oh yeah, I see you there, Dimitri. You are connected, so you can unmute yourself and let us know if you are planning to share your screen or I can do it for you. Dimitri, do you hear us?
Perhaps we could put up Dimitri's slides and we can figure out how to make sure he can speak. So Dimitri, you have to ask to get you in the queue.
Yeah, we don't have slides because, well, Dimitri said that he would use his browser to show
Got it. Okay.
their initiative. So in the meanwhile, if anyone has any general comment about any of the presentations we had today, feel free to queue and comment. Also, as we wait a little bit,
Yeah, do we
I
need
see
to
that there are
help
some.
Dimitri figure out how to participate? Dimitri, can you hear us? Can you unmute so we know that you're there? We see you in the queue. I mean, in the participants list.
If you joined, you can also send a comment in the chat. That is one of the tabs on the top left. Well, as I said, while we wait, any general comment? Any announcement, perhaps? I saw the HRPC people in the audience. Maybe you can give us a teaser about what's going to be discussed just tomorrow at the same time, I think, in the HRPC working group.
Hey, Leandro. Hey, Jane. Thanks for that. Yeah, tomorrow HRPC is meeting in the first session. We have two speakers. The first is from Ericsson. John Matson's going to talk about the 5G standard, but is focusing on the privacy, lawful access, surveillance issues with the specification, which should be quite interesting. The second speaker is from Witness, which is a NGO based in New York. It's been around for 30 plus years that does media, alternative media activism, and they are presenting on the C2PA standard. I'm not going to remember the acronym at this stage in the morning, but C2PA is an effort, it's an association coalition effort led by Adobe to at sort of a bare minimum update EXIF data for images, but the ideal is actually to create some manifest, I guess, documentation of where images originate. So it's about trust in media sources. So that'll also be interesting because it's as we know from certificate authorities and things like that, trust in the digital landscape is hard and doesn't always mean what we think it means. So those are the two. And then of course we have our work items for the group. We'll be talking about guidelines for reviewers and authors of internet drafts in the IETF and the IRTF on human right protocol considerations and how they can action those. We'll also be talking about draft Association, which looks at freedom of expression and protocols. And then we have a presentation from the authors of the 00 draft on IP blocking that's also being discussed today in INT area. So for those who missed the INT area presentation, you can come to HRPC, and I imagine that the quality of the discussion on can censorship be a good thing, question mark, will be an interesting one for sure. Thanks a lot for that plug. We hope to see you there, and thanks for hosting today's meeting. It's been really interesting.
Thank you so much, Mallory. Pleasure. And I think it's if I'm not mistaken, it's the same as today, in a different meeting room or different URL, depending on where you are. So I think, oh, Dimitri, you are there.
Hey.
Hi, hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, wonderful.
Great. I'm just asking to share my screen.
And I'm granting several times. For some reason, I'm not allowed to. Well, it worked before. Maybe Jen, can you go to the queue?
Yep. Grant screen. Did. Can you show your screen now, Dimitri? I've granted it.
Let me see. Okay, screen requested. Full screen, expand video. Screen requested. Okay. Is there a button I need to press to actually share it?
No. I'm gonna reload my page in case, because I clicked on grant several times.
So have I. So.
It says I'm sharing it. Can you see the screen?
Maybe Leandro might need to stop sharing his screen before he can
Oh yes,
hand over.
yes.
Exactly.
Sorry, just wanted to mention that.
Thanks,
Done.
Rajiv. That's helpful.
Yeah, that was the trick. Yes.
Can you Dimitri? Can you introduce yourself just briefly so folks know who you are?
Yes, of course. Just 1 second, please. Okay. So, hello, everybody. Good morning, like it is here. Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Dmitry Vitaliev. I'm the founding director of an organization called Equality. We develop technology solutions for the promotion and protection of human rights online. And I guess I can just launch into it, yeah? Please let me know when we are coming up on time.
Feel free to start, yes.
Okay, thank you. So just very briefly, some of Equality's projects include DDoS mitigation infrastructure, such as Deflect, and technology to circumvent internet censorship, such as the Sino project. The Sino project uses decentralized networking, is built on BitTorrent protocols, and allows people not only to request content which may otherwise be censored in a particular network, but thereafter it allows people to share this content with each other peer-to-peer. And I'm talking about this project because it has a relevance to the presentation later on. Apart from doing technology, we've also been involved for many years in digital security capacity building, basically working with civil society, media, human rights organizations around the world, lifting awareness of existing digital security risks, and bringing them resources and capability in order to mitigate these risks. One of the ways we have found to be effective to do this work is to set up permanent learning centers, digital security schools, so to say. And one of the schools was set up in Kiev, in Ukraine, back in 2016. It's called the Digital Security School 380. This school has worked with local media and various types of civil society for many years now, and was one of the reasons why the organization, myself personally, were interested in what was happening in Ukraine during the last several years. Now, as the Russian army was amassing its troops around the Ukrainian border, and I'm sure many people around the world were considering how to help in this particular situation. We were as well. And it felt that remotely, in expectation of what was to come, we imagined a battlefield scenario whereby a prolonged period of invasion would lead to destruction of internet infrastructure, whether this was through bombing activity or some sort of malicious action against concrete internet exchanges in Ukraine. The scenario that we were envisioning were certain segments of the Ukrainian network being disconnected from others, and therefore people finding themselves in these areas being disconnected from the rest of the internet. I went to Ukraine to begin researching and conducting conversations on how true or how realistic this scenario could be. What I understood and what you probably saw from the previous presentation is that Ukraine presents a very varied and a very full market of both internet service providers and connectivity with the outside world. Most people who I spoke with were also concerned by the possible risk of certain disconnections. However, internet service providers were quite confident that the variety of connectivity should be sufficient to withstand most attempts against the network. However, what was quite obvious when studying the network in Ukraine was that quite a lot of reliance was built on certain IXPs being available, being online, particularly in Kiev and also in Lviv. And it felt that other cities such as Odessa, Dnipro, Kharkiv may become isolated during prolonged military activity. And unfortunately, this did happen, and it's continuing to happen in various towns and cities of Ukraine. Here on the screen, you can see providers from Irpin. I'm not sure how well you can see these photos. fixing internet cables connecting this town to Kiev, to the IXP in Kiev, after a bombing had destroyed some of the cable infrastructure. Now, the problem with a network losing connectivity to other networks, of course, is that most people using the internet today rely on centralized services. And communications are based on the fact that services such as WhatsApp or Telegram or other well-known services are available. However, having spent a couple of decades working in the field of open source solutions and decentralized communications, what we knew is that this is not a necessity. Connectivity to the global internet is not a precursor for being able to continue communications with other people in your region, in your town. So what we decided to do was stand up a network of decentralized communication servers. I'm going to change this page to English. Basically, source and procure machines with as many internet service providers who were offering hosting in various Ukrainian cities. Now, this was actually a little bit harder than I expected, and I think we find this more and more in countries around the world, where not only connectivity, but a lot of the data centers are concentrated in a few big cities, in a few sort of central points around the country. I think it was kind of similar situation in Ukraine, even though there were several thousand ISPs providing last leg connectivity. It was difficult to find data centers outside of a few major cities in Ukraine. Nevertheless, we did find these servers. And basically what we did was to use existing tools and protocols that allowed for federated and decentralized communications. Basically, each of the servers offers matrix services, and we provide web access using the Element desktop capability, also via Element app. A Delta Chat server, which is an encrypted messaging service using SMTP, another federated and decentralized protocol. And then other tools that work in close proximity to each other, such as Briar, which offers mesh networking capabilities, mesh messaging capabilities over Bluetooth. And web browsing tools, one of our tools as well, Sino, which allows people to access web content that is stored in a distributed cache, among others. We're also hoping to add decentralized and federated social media tools and other chat messaging in the near future. So the point of this is that anybody who is, let's say in Kharkiv, can connect to the ISP in Kharkiv, even if Kharkiv itself is disconnected from the rest of the Ukrainian network and thereby internet. And in here, they will be able to join public rooms, to create private rooms, and to be able to stay in touch with each other. I'm going to show you a couple of public rooms where there are hundreds of people basically staying in touch with each other, swapping information on where bombing or other military activities is going on, trying to organize how to get out, trying to organize how to get supplies. Now, by and large, the specific scenario that we have stood up this infrastructure for has not come to pass in most areas. In other use cases, in Mariupol, for example, where the city is cut off completely, we weren't able to procure a server. And there's conflicting information as to whether that would even be accessible because electricity has been cut to this region for the last 3 weeks. Nevertheless, this backup channel exists. It exists in 6 and soon to be more locations around Ukraine. People know about it, so they know when to turn to it. And people are using it actively now, even when this is a backup channel. And hopefully it's not something that will become critical, but what is important is that it is there. And then, of course, what is also important is that we can show and we can show a use case of other ways the internet can be today without reliance on specific companies to provide us the ability to communicate with each other. So unfortunately, or fortunately, depends how you want to see it, decentralized networking is necessary technology for geographic areas experiencing various types of disaster situations. Now, as we were developing and growing this service, it had appeared, or it had become apparent, that the invading forces, Russia, was also clamping down on its own network. We're trying to control the information, the propaganda it was feeding to its own citizens, that there was no war and that there was no heavy bombing and destruction of life. Now, in order to do this, they had begun to implement what is called the sovereign internet. The sovereign internet is actually a piece of legislation passed several years ago in 2019 that mandated the Russian government and various telecommunication services to be able to disconnect from the global internet whilst maintaining the national internet functioning. Nobody really knew whether a complete disconnection was possible. But what we're seeing now is that Roskomnadzor and other various bodies are moving slowly, maybe not so slowly, but surely towards this goal, already with a huge amount of international resources, including all of Meta, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and many other services being blocked for access from within Russia. And then in reverse, we're seeing quite a large number of network carriers and various platforms blocking access to Russians as well. So we kind of see this disconnection on both sides of the border. it became apparent to us that a similar service that we were building for disaster relief is also necessary in Russia in order to allow people to communicate with each other when the sovereign internet is complete, when the network has been disconnected, also as a backup channel in case nothing else works. We're seeing the successful blockage of numerous popular circumvention tools and VPNs. And whilst we don't hope to create a network that can support internal communications of 100 million people, we do want to show an example of how this can be done, and hope that people interested in doing this can replicate these services, can stand up more federated instances, either connected to this one, technically speaking, or branding wise, or completely separate. In order to do this, we have put the code that basically provisions and configures the various services included in this project. Provision services are inside a Docker Swarm, and it's relatively easy now to stand up new instances. So in summary, as I was telling Leandro, we're not really inventing any new technology here. That was the point of our intervention. We had to move very quickly. We had to deploy existing services. We chose messaging services that support end-to-end encryption by default. We have engaged numerous volunteers to become moderators of public rooms in Matrix. We have also engaged local technical people to be able to support this network should we lose contact with either one of these networks due to disconnections. And we want to kind of plant the seed that another internet is possible. We want to plant the seed not only with the tech community who already understands this, but with average users, which is why we have created this sort of index page, a way to enter the service in an interface that may be more or less familiar, or at least non-overly complicated for normal people who find themselves in a disconnecting network and possibly under high stress as well. We're looking for all sorts of technical contributions of people who are interested. The code is open, the project is open, and unfortunately the times have propelled this type of technology into something which is becoming not only relevant, but maybe also critical. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dimitri. It's not only that another internet is possible, but it seems to work, and it's helping people to communities affected by the war, let's say, in all the sides. Thank you so much. I don't know if there are any comments or questions from the audience. Yeah, Julius, can go ahead.
Yeah, there have been reports, which I've personally checked, of UDP, of some kinds of UDP traffic being blocked between Europe and Russia. And I couldn't find any information about who was doing the blocking. Do you have any information about that?
Well, in Russia, the primary body responsible for implementing state-mandated censorship or disconnections is Roskomnadzor. Now,
No, but I'm speaking about this specific occurrence that has been happening recently. I mean, Roskomnadzor blocks specific websites and specific, but there has been wide-scale blocking of certain kinds of UDP traffic, which is very confusing. You're not aware of that, are you?
I mean, I'm aware of that happening periodically in the past. And as I was trying to say that Roskomnadzor also develops mandates for ISPs to implement various types of blocking on the provided infrastructure. So specifically, I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to, but this has been done in the past during.
Okay, so what is happening? So if I may say just a few words, what seems to be happening is that they are blocking quick handshakes to force HTTP3 to fall back to HTTP2. And nobody has any idea, nobody seems to have any idea about why anyone would be interested in doing that. Okay. I just was wondering whether you had any further information on that.
On what? On the why?
Well, that's the interesting bit. So yes, on the why.
I mean, look, I'll just answer briefly and maybe not exactly. All methods of circumventing existing blockages are also being eliminated at the moment. So whether they're going after DOH or other methods of BitTorrent connectivity, in order to implement a sovereign network, you have to eliminate all methods of getting around your blockages. So this is probably an extenuation of that.
Thank you.
I see Rajiv in the queue. You can go ahead.
I was just saying, probably when you're talking of a massive amount of UDP blocking, it's probably also targeted at protocols like WireGuard, which is becoming, the VPN platform of choice for a large number of VPN providers, because of its reasonably light footprint. And I've actually seen cases where, at least on the corporate side, not on the sovereign side, but many corporate firewall systems now explicitly tend to filter and block out UDP traffic to prevent WireGuard sessions from being a vector to filtrate information. So it could be just as simple as them deciding that, hey, this is just a VPN channel, and just kick the whole lot of UDP traffic out of the routing mechanism.
Okay, so if there are no other questions, thank you so much for all the presentations today. You know that there is a Gaia mailing list if you want to discuss further. I left that idea board if you want to provide some ideas about how to make the internet environmentally friendly or to contribute to it. Of course, it's not that many other areas where it can be. There are many areas of improvement, of course, but ours is the internet. Well, I don't know if Jane, you want to say some closing words? I see a
Just
comment from Jane.
Yeah, just a quick ask, Dimitri, if people wanted to contact you, could you pop a way to do that into the chat? Really interesting presentations today, and I think it speaks to the importance of, and this is a personal perspective, obviously, bottom-up IXP development, more data centers, Dimitri, or, and just more connectivity in general. And so just thank you to Leandro, to Vesna, to Michuki, to Dimitri, and to everyone that has contributed in the chat. We're keen to keep promoting a global internet for all. And so if we, Rajiv, do you have a comment before we close? And remember, we do have the mailing list.
Yeah, so I was wondering if you have the time under any other business at the end. I thought I would like to bring up a small introduction to the N50 project because that's very closely aligned with the goals of this working group, and it's a project that I'm actively involved with, promoting digital connectivity and literacy for the remaining 50% of the world's population that is either underserved or under literate in terms of being connected with the global commons via the internet.
We may not have enough time for you, Rajiv, so I wonder if it's possible. Do you have a presentation you could pop into the Gaia chat, and we could try and hold another online Gaia in between this meeting?
I don't have a presentation ready, so
Okay.
if you believe that this is something that might make sense to maybe push forward to 1/4, I'm happy to plan that out, because we are actually shortly in the process of going live at a pilot site in sub-Saharan Africa, in Zambia. So we should actually have some real community engagement statistics to present by the next meeting, if you believe that's appropriate.
Absolutely. It would be great. So could we kindly ask you to help us so that
I
you
will.
could...
I have not joined the Gaia group. I'm a IETF newcomer
Well, we're
here,
recruiting.
but I will join and hopefully target a presentation for the next meeting.
Excellent.
But I've already put the link in the chat, so if anyone's interested, please do go have a look at it. It is a pretty large initiative. I think spearheaded mostly by Intel. They're the ones who are kind of driving this at the moment. Though there's involvement from Dell and Geeks Without Frontiers and a number of
Sure.
other partners involved in it.
Okay. We would be more than happy to have you speak at the next Gaia, and Leandro and I'll work with you on how to do that. You can join quite easily, and if you need to, you can just email either of us.
Yeah, I'm on Data Tracker, so I'll just join the mailing list and put in a quick introduction in there.
Awesome. And there are quite a few people in that mailing list who do some work in Sub-Saharan and around the planet. So you'll find a really receptive audience, and that would be great.
Great. Looking forward to it.
Okay. Again, thank you to everyone, and thank you for the active participation from the audience. Thank you to everyone in the room. Thank you to Colin, who has been humoring us and helping us go from what we thought some of us could be there in Vienna, but I think we did a wonderful job. And thank you to Meet Echo, the team, for all of their help. We couldn't do this without you. And thank you very much to the IETF Secretariat and everyone who's working hard behind the scenes, because we know this is the first time we've had a hybrid event, and it seemed to have gone really well, at least from my side, watching from this end. Leandro, anything else from your side?
No, I subscribe every single word, and pleasure to meet you all and share all our concerns and solutions and challenges, and see you soon face to face, hopefully.
Yes. And help us contribute on the Gaia list, and if necessary, we could stand up an informal vid session if people want it. But anyway, Thank you so much to everybody, and have a good rest of the IETF for those on the ground and those participating remotely. And a plug for the HRPC, the Mallory's group that will be meeting soon enough. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you and bye.